Lisa lives in Charlotte. Asher lives with my brother, his dad, in Maine. And so I don't get to see him very often. So it's such a surprise for them to be here. Would you give him a warm welcome? He's a drummer, but I won't put him on the spot. So. I can't resist telling this story. A number of years ago when I was in seminary in Kansas City, and I was on summer break, and so I drove from Kansas City to North Carolina. At the time, he was living in Hickory. They were living in Hickory, North Carolina. So I stopped and picked up Asher. Asher was 4, I think, at the time. And then we drove on to the beach. So we drove from Hickory to the coast. And while we were in the car, I asked Asher, I said, "What are you excited to do at the beach?" And he said, "I'm going to fish from an airplane." You remember that? And I said, "Fish from an airplane?" I was thinking, I cannot imagine. I've never heard of that. He said, "Yes, Aunt Darlene, I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to fish from an airplane." And I said, "Fish from an airplane? I don't know. I don't think you can do that." He said, "Yes, you can, Aunt Darlene. My dad just did it last weekend. My dad does it all the time." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes, they call it fly fishing." Asher, I should send that to Reader's Digest, so you may make some money. From the mouth of babes. It was truly, truly wonderful. Well, today we want to talk about not fishing from airplanes, but at the pace of maybe fly fishing, what it would feel like, what it is like to live at the pace of grace. I had the incredible opportunity to live and work on the island of Maui for almost 3 years. Would you show me that first slide? And when I first moved there, I lived in Paia, and Montecuji, this is a Zen Soto mission and temple by the sea. Because if you look over to the left, right behind this temple, there's a cemetery, and right behind this temple is this beautiful sort of private stretch of beach. And I was like a 10-minute walk from there, if that. So almost every morning I would go down and I'd take a nice walk on the beach, and then I would sit on the rocks and meditate before I'd go back home. And one morning while I was sitting on a rock, this mantra, statement of truth, affirmation came to me that said, "No need to hurry, no time to waste. I live my life at the pace of grace." Would you show me the next slide? No need to worry, the next one. No time to waste. I live my life at the pace of grace. And as I sat with that, I thought, wow, what a great T-shirt that would make. What a profound statement. But what I began to realize was that was making its way into the very fabric of my being, that I had spent probably the first 40 plus years of my life get her done. I've been working since I could. I was in the tobacco fields. Anybody else here from North Carolina ever know what it is to put in tobacco? I was in the tobacco fields as a kid. I worked all my life and just in overdrive almost. And so when I had the opportunity to live in this beautiful place of paradise, a place that I never thought I would retire there or live there the rest of my life, I knew that it probably was a window, an opportunity, a time in my life. And every day I treated it as what it was, an incredible gift, a gift to be on this beautiful place. And as this truth statement came to me that there's no need to hurry, but there's also no time to waste. You see, there's a perfect point of equilibrium and balance in between that, and that is at the pace of grace. Because how many of you can relate to hurrying through life? Just hurry, hurry, hurry through life. And how many of you can know that there's some parts of your life that you probably wasted? But there's no need to hurry and no time to waste, but to live our life at the pace of grace. I've always identified with a particular story in the Bible that's found in the Gospel of Luke. It's a story about two sisters named Martha and Mary. And as this particular story goes, Martha, Jesus and his disciples are traveling through, and Martha had invited Jesus to stay at her house. And so we know that she was a spiritual seeker. There was something that she wanted, and she asked him to stay at her house. And the story goes like this. While Jesus and his followers were traveling, Jesus went into a town. A woman named Martha invited him to stay at her house. Martha had a sister named Mary, who was sitting at Jesus' feet and listening to him teach. But Martha was busy with all the work to be done. She went in and said, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me alone to do all the work? Tell her to help me." Now, if you press pause for a moment, here's this person that she's wanted to experience his presence. He's in her very household, and her sister is sitting at his feet, at the feet of Jesus, soaking up everything that's going on. But Martha is off in the kitchen. She's busy. She's fretting. Anybody else can identify? She's missing the party. And so what does she do? She goes to Jesus and says, "Don't you care that my sister is sitting there? Tell her to get up off of her pillow and come and help me." So she's gone from being a seeker to now being demanding. And have you ever noticed, probably like me, that when the demands of life begin to take over, sometimes we get demanding, that we match it with that same kind of frustrated and overwhelmed energy. And what is said, though, is these words to me are priceless when he says, "The Lord answered and said, 'Martha, Martha, you are busy and anxious and worried about many things, but only one thing is important. Mary has chosen the better thing, and it will not be taken from her.'" And that's the end of the story. And if you're Martha, you're kind of frustrated because you're probably like, "Well, I'm just about as happy for Mary as I can possibly be. I really am happy for Mary, but where does that leave me?" The point of this story is we are all Martha and Mary. Mary, it's no coincidence that it's the name Mary that was the mother of Jesus. Mary is that aspect of every person that symbolizes the part of us that knows how to make room for the holy presence. It's about what the Zen Buddhist would say, be present to the presence. You see, Mary is that part. It doesn't matter if you're male, female. We all have a dimension of our being that knows how to be present. And what the scripture is saying is she was present to the presence, and that can never be taken away from you. And we all also have the aspect of us of the Mary syndrome, or the Martha that is always busy, or we feel like we're somehow missing out on what we're seeking. But we also have, in unity, we look at Jesus as one who embodied the Christ presence. Just as Buddha was an enlightened being, there have been many enlightened beings among us that this story represents, that we all have the Mary, the Martha, and this Christ presence within us. We all have the capacity to be present to the presence. And so holding on to that affirmation of there's no need to hurry, to take a breath, there's no need to hurry, but there's also no time to waste, because time and life is precious. And so to find that balance point of living life at the pace of grace, living life where we are able to be present to the presence. When I began to think about this week, and how can we learn to do that? What are some practical ways we can do? I was reminded of an artist and a teacher that I loved as a child, someone that today is still one of my favorite all-time artists. Would you show me the next slide? Do any of you remember this guy? My nephew's probably saying, "Who is the white guy with the afro?" You watched him, so you know. But how many of you recognize Bob Ross? How many of you have never seen him before? Good, there are a few. I encourage you. I don't know where you obviously missed out on PBS growing up as a child. Bob Ross, Robert Norman Ross, had a television show on PBS. He had a 30-minute show, And during 30 minutes, he would paint an incredible painting. He used a technique called wet on wet, where he would use oil paint and create an amazing painting within 30 minutes. He inspired me as a child to get some paint. He believed everybody could create. He was an incredible artist, but what was his look was really unique, but he had this ultra-soothing voice. I'm going to show you a little video clip at the end, but you could just go to sleep. He could have read the phone book, and I would have found that relaxing. Even as a child, his voice was relaxing to me. There was something about him. And so when I went back this week and looked at him, what I realized, what I didn't know, he was actually in the Air Force 20 years. And he was stationed in Alaska, and it was the beauty in Alaska that inspired him to paint. But when he was in the military, what he said about that was, I was the guy who made you scrub the latrines, the guy who made you make your bed, the guy who screamed at you for anything and everything. The job required me to be a mean, tough person, and I was fed up with it. I promised myself if I ever got away, I would never push and yell again. And so painting, when he was in the military, was his outlet. And when he got out of the military, he began this show, which was called The Joy of Painting. And for 30 minutes, his very ultra-soothing voice and gentle technique would invite the listener into his world. And so one of the things about living at the pace of grace that he reminded us is that it doesn't matter if it was a Picasso or a Bob Ross, that every great artist begins with a blank canvas. A blank canvas. The Zen teachers teach the power of a beginner's mind. Most of you know one of my favorite mantras. Say it with me if you know it. That was then, this is now. So if you didn't know it, now you do. Let's do that together. That was then, this is now. In the scriptures, Jesus would teach his disciples that when they left a place, to shake the dust off your feet. You see, feet symbolized your status and your understanding. To shake the dust off meant that no matter what you collected, no matter where you were, no matter your status, the status of the person in front of you, no matter what you got yourself involved in, shake it off. Create a beginner's mind. That was then, this is now. Living at the pace of grace definitely requires us to realize that every day is a blank canvas, that every opportunity requires a blank canvas of sorts, because it requires us, a true opportunity requires the willingness to let go of how things have been done, to be able to be fully present. I remember seeing a cartoon of Peanuts, Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown, to me, was one of the greatest spiritual teachers. And in this particular cartoon clip, Charlie Brown is on the base of the softball field, and he has his glove. It's up in the air, and the ball is coming. It's just like this. It's like he can't miss. And then something happens, and he moves, and it hits the ground. And so Lucy is jumping up and down and screaming at Charlie Brown. And he said, I don't know what happened. I saw that fly ball. I was right under it. And then I guess I let the past get in my eyes. That all those times before he had dropped it, he let the past get in his eyes. It reminded me of a prayer that I saw one time that I read that someone said was actually written on a prison wall, and it says author known to God, unknown but known to God. Dear God, please untie the knots that are in my mind, my heart, and my life. Remove the have-nots, the can-nots, and the do-nots that I have in my mind. Erase the will-nots, the may-nots, the might-nots that find a home in my heart. Release me from the could-nots, the would-nots, and the should-nots that obstruct my life. And most of all, dear God, I ask that you remove from my mind and my heart and my life all of the am-nots that I have allowed to hold me back, especially the thought that I am not who you say I am. Amen. Author known to God. Isn't that beautiful? The power of a blank canvas and beginning every day. No need to hurry, no time to waste. Living life at the pace of grace. Remember that every day can be a blank canvas if we simply allow it to be so. The second great point that Bob Ross reminded me of is the power of a pause. He worked very fast. He would create a complete painting in 30 minutes. But periodically he would stop and he'd say, now let's pause a minute and see where this is going. The power of a sacred pause. I have a friend, Reverend Paulette Pipe, who came from England. She's a black woman, came from England. She looks like a goddess, this beautiful woman. She used to be the director of the retreat department at Unity Village. She now has a radio program called Touching the Stillness. I hope to have her here sometime. She has this incredible voice, this calmness about her. And when she first moved to the United States, she came to the United States to go to the seminary. And Paulette had spent time with Thich Nhat Hanh out at his Buddhist temple in southern France. She was there with him at Plum Village. And at Plum Village, periodically they ring the temple bell. And if you're at Plum Village at this monastery and the temple bell rings, everybody stops, takes a deep breath, and it's a return to mindfulness. It's a sacred pause. Paulette said when she moved to the Midwest, she found this grocery store that she loved. It was one of these grocery store chains, probably like a Trader Joe or an Earth Fare, one of these health-conscious grocery stores. And when she walked in, if you've ever been in one of those stores, they make this little chime periodically. And so Paulette thought that was the chime as the sacred, so she loved it. She would be shopping and she'd hear the chime and she'd stop and she'd take a breath. She'd continue her shopping and she'd hear the chime and she'd stop and take a breath. And she told me, and I had remembered being in that same store and thinking, that's a bit annoying that they hit that chime all the time. And when she got up and talked about how she loved shopping at the store where they had the sacred silent pause chime, I felt about that big. I thought, why didn't I think of that? And I talked to her and she said, you Americans, you know how to multitask. Why not learn how to multitask and use the sacred breath? I thought, wow. So now, if I go to one of these stores and I hear that chime, I stop and I take a breath. Bob Ross knew that point between no need to hurry, no time to waste really invites us, and I believe requires us, to cultivate Zen habits. You now can download these apps on your phone that periodically it will chime. I know some of you have them because you've been meeting with me in your office when your chime went off every so many minutes. And it's a delightful sound when you know that. And so I invite you to find something. I also have another friend that every time she goes through a doorway or touches a doorknob, that's her reminder to take a sacred breath, to come home now. No need to hurry, no time to waste. Finding our way into that sacred breath, to be here now. The power of a blank canvas. The power of a sacred pause. The third thing that Bob Ross used to say a lot that really touched me was think like water. Think like water. He would say things like, let's put a little happy tree here. Remember he'd say, there are no accidents. No, there are no mistakes, just happy little accidents. Let's put a little happy tree here, a happy cloud. He referred to everything as happy. And he would often say, flow like water. Be happy and flow like water. And what he meant by that is, don't get stuck. And if you make a mistake on the canvas, he would even sometimes intentionally put a piece of paint in a strange place just to prove to you that you could turn it into a bird or a tree, or you could make it something beautiful. You could make it something intentional. And to learn to flow like water was, don't get stuck. Water can move around obstacles. It doesn't get stuck. And water also pours itself into everything. To really pour yourself, put yourself in a way that is meaningful. During the same time that I lived on Maui, and it literally was as if I was being recalibrated, I'm a person that had panic attacks and anxiety and stuff in my past, and thank God I've been healed of that. And it's like I was being recalibrated. And as a part of that recalibration, when I was on Maui, I met a couple named Susie and Sylvan. And I want to tell you a little bit about their story. In 1977, Susie lived in the continental United States, the mainland, and she was diagnosed with a terminal form of cancer. She wasn't doing well at all, and she didn't have a particularly supportive family, and she didn't want to be a burden to them, so she made up her mind that she was just going to ask the universe where should she go to spend the rest of the days of her life. So she took an atlas, and she just dropped it on the floor, closed her eyes, and pointed, and said, wherever I'm pointing, that's where I'm going, and that's where I'll die. She was pointing to Maui. So she was good to her word. What a great place to go. She went to Maui. She found a little place to live, and she had a next-door neighbor named Sylvan. And every afternoon when Sylvan got home, he would see Susie outside, and he'd go outside, and they would sit, and they'd talk. And they got to be very close in a pretty short period of time. Until one day, Sylvan actually turned to Susie and said, Susie, I love you. She jumped up and started crying and ran off. Not exactly the response you're looking for when you finally say, I love you, and they jump up and they run off. They came to my church in Maui and told their story. Sylvan got up and he ran after her, and he stopped her and said, wait, I'm sorry, what did I do? What did I do? And she said, you can't love me, I'm dying. And then she told him his story, her story, which she had not up until that point. She said, I have a terminal, whatever it was. I don't have long to live. I came here, so don't get attached to me. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And he said, well, you can't die because I love you. And so he took her to a holistic doctor who put her on a diet. And she started working with that diet. But one day Sylvan came home, and Susie had found a little bird, and the bird had broken its wing. And he saw something in Susie that he had never even seen. She was more alive than ever. And he thought, she is caring for that bird, and it's giving her a reason to live. So he went to work, and he said, does anybody have a sick cat or a dog or know of anything, a pig? I'll take anything that needs help. Would you give me the slide? Almost 40 years later, it started in 1977, they now have a place on Maui, Susie and Sylvan, that is, it's the East Maui Animal Refuge, but would you show me the next slide? It's known as the Boo Boo Zoo. It started as a boo-boo, and it's for any kind of animal that has a boo-boo. They've had land donated. Today, they have, on any given day, they have between 300 and 400 animals. And what that reminded me of, I thought about her this week because she's truly a person that knows how to flow like water. That even when life said, you have a terminal illness, she somehow made the best of it. And life had another plan for her. This couple are an inspiration to pretty much anybody that's ever seen this place. Our church would volunteer and work with them because, as you can imagine, with 300 or 400 animals that all have a boo-boo of some sort, they need a lot of help. But this couple, just as Bob Ross, are true reminders of what it is to realize that life is always offering us a blank canvas. And you see, for us, it's about partnering, cooperating, and saying, I accept that blank canvas. That was then and this is now. To become intentional about cultivating those sacred pauses, those breaths that return me to the here and now. No need to worry, no time to waste. Help me be present. Let me fully engage my Martha and my Mary and my Christ and my Buddha, whatever speaks to you. And then to flow like water. Would you cue up the video? I want to show you a video that sort of wraps this up.
Hello, I'm Bob Ross, and I'd like to welcome you. First of all, let me take just a moment to thank you for allowing me back into your homes. If this is your first time with us, let me extend a personal invitation for you to drag out your oil paints and paint along with us each week. Let's go over to the canvas here and let's get started. I believe, every day's a good day when you paint. I believe, It'll bring a lot of good thoughts to your heart. I believe, every day's a good day when you paint. I believe, it'll bring a lot of good thoughts to your heart. Let's build a happy little cloud. Let's build some happy little trees. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here. You can almost paint with anything. All you have to do is practice. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here. This is your world. You're the creator. Find freedom on this canvas. Believe that you can do it. Cause you can do it. Give it a little touch. Give it a little push. Make love to the canvas. Give it a little touch. Give it a little push. Caress it. Very gentle. Grab it, lift it, fluff it. You can go on and on and on. Back and forth, back and forth and forth. Layer after layer after layer. Let's build a happy little cloud. Let's build some happy little trees. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here. This is your world. You're the creator. Find freedom on this canvas. Believe that you can do it. Cause you can do it. Relax, let it flow. Think like water. Relax, let it flow. You can go on and on and on. We don't make mistakes. We just have happy accidents. You can do anything that you want to do. Total power. Sing along, have a good time. This is your world. You're the creator. Find freedom on this canvas. Believe that you can do it. Cause you can do it. Cause you can do it. I believe. Every day's a good day when you paint. I believe. It'll bring a lot of good thoughts to your heart. I believe. Every day's a good day when you paint. I believe. It'll bring a lot of good thoughts to your heart.
Now you've met Bob Ross, Robert Norman Ross. I invite you this week to pick up a blank canvas. You know, they make them about this big now. You can get a big one, a little one, or tear off a little piece of paper. That can be a blank canvas. But to let that be your symbol of reminder, the power of the pace of grace, that space for beginning, that space of presence. That's what grace is all about. So oftentimes in traditional Christianity, the word for me, grace, has a real yuck factor around it, quite frankly. Grace is often said to mean unmerited favor. So would you just say yuck with me? Yuck. Thank goodness Unity doesn't look at it that way. That it's not about unmerited favor or being unworthy. And interestingly enough, if you go back to the Aramaic, the word grace, the Greek, what grace actually means is the divine influence upon our heart and its reflection in our life. The divine influence upon our heart and its reflection in our life, that's grace. Grace is that reflection of all that is, the life within us seeking to come forth, asking for us to bring it to life. And it's not a matter of deserving or undeserving, because everyone is born worthy. There's no such thing as not being worthy of the life energy that you already are. Grace is a reminder that it's up to us to make space to reflect it. And so Bob Ross and I have written a song to help remind you, that's a joke, of this particular song, and it goes, I believe, everything is possible here. I believe, I believe, I believe. Sing that part with me. I believe, everything is possible here. I believe, I believe, I believe. There's no need